I think what's interesting most is that you're not just a journalist in this situation when you're from the local community newspaper. You're also a social worker. You're also there to listen. You're visiting people who have been deeply traumatised by a horrifying situation. And it's very easy when you're the parachute journalist coming in to just wander into someone's house, get the grab and leave. But when you're the community journalist, you have to live in that community. You have to spend the appropriate amount of time with the people you're with. I had to explain to my boss why it would take so long in the field to get various elements of the story. And what I said to him was that, look, we're in a situation where these people have got nothing. They have no information. They don't know what's happening. Your first job before you ask them to tell you their life story or the story of the past 24 hours, the first job is to make sure they're okay. And just to spend a few minutes with them, and you very quickly realise, hang on, my role here isn't just as the journalist to just physically come in and grab a few good quotes off this person and leave them to their misery and move on to the next person. You're also there, you are part of that community, you have an obligation to these people to make sure they get what help they can get. One of the other key things that I've learned from this, that perhaps I didn't know before, there's a number of lessons in terms of how the media operated. A few observations that I would give you. One is that on the evening the cyclone hit, social media was extremely valuable. And in particular, people using Facebook. I know I use Facebook myself to get messages out to my friends on the evening the cyclone was hitting. I find that almost peculiar because the news websites who had a lot of people on the ground and all the major news organisations, the people didn't really turn to those news organisations so much. They turned to their social media networks while the cyclone was hitting. It's very interesting, and I suspect, and again it's a topic that probably requires significant further research, I suspect part of the reason for that is because the major media outlets haven't grasped the digital medium. They haven't really grasped how to communicate online with their audience. And that, I suspect, is why people turn to social media on the evening the cyclone hit. Now, following the cyclone, another interesting observation. Sure, the ABC did a fantastic job with its cyclone coverage. No doubt ABC will win Walkley Awards, and they've done some very important work with this cyclone. But when you hit the ground, when you're in the more remote areas where people don't have communications, they don't necessarily have a radio, they might have been flooded out, they might have had a transistor radio, but it was, their house was flooded and with the cyclone they lost everything. They don't have telephones, so they don't have internet. They basically have no mechanism for communication except for one thing, the local newspaper. And I must admit, prior to this event happening, people were talking about the death of the newspaper is nigh and the end is nigh. This totally changed my perspective on the role of the printed word in a major catastrophe. When it comes down to when we look at things in isolation, when we step back from all this, one of the things that I've realised is that the printed word, the ability to get the message out in a written form, something as simple as the phone numbers for all of the emergency services, who you have to contact, what the specific situation is. There is a substantial value to the printed word, and unfortunately, I have to be frank about this, the disaster management authorities simply don't appear to have grasped that and don't appear to have grasped the importance of it. They were still in a phase where, yes, it's very important, we'll get all our messages out by the ABC. Well, I was visiting people who didn't have the ABC in more remote places such as Silkwood. Silkwood had not just been hit by a Category 5 cyclone, it had also been flooded following the cyclone, and a lot of people there had no means of being able to get their message out or to get information in.